I accidentally caught my wife talking about betraying me, with encouragement from her closest friend, while I was buried in overtime shifts. Instead of confronting her, I quietly transferred our savings and initiated divorce proceedings while she was out doing exactly what I feared. Hey, Reddit. Never imagined I'd end up writing something like this. But life has a twisted sense of irony. Let me start with some background, because context matters, and I know you all appreciate a proper setup. I'm a 34-year-old guy working in industrial equipment sales. Picture conveyor systems, automated packaging machines, and all the unglamorous tech that keeps warehouses functioning. I've been with the same company for 8 years, starting in inside sales and eventually climbing into a regional management role. My wife, Sarah, is 31. She teaches yoga part-time and occasionally takes freelance graphic design jobs whenever she feels inspired. We've been married for 3 years and together for 6. We met during a trivia night at a local brewery. Her team beat mine, mostly because I'm apparently useless when it comes to early 2000s pop culture. We signed a solid prenup before getting married. I watched too many co-workers get financially wrecked during divorces, and Sarah didn't push back at all. She said she understood the importance of protecting what each of us brought into the relationship. Things started shifting around her car situation. She drives a 2019 model that's had ongoing transmission problems for months. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make every drive feel like a gamble. She'd been hinting for a while that she wanted something newer and more dependable. I couldn't really relate since I drive a company vehicle and don't deal with daily breakdown anxiety. About 2 months ago, her hints turned into specifics. She showed me listings for a certified pre-owned Subaru Outback. Reasonable price, around $28,000. The issue was that we didn't have that kind of money sitting around. We've been aggressively tackling my student loans and putting extra toward the mortgage. Still, I figured she'd earned it. She'd been patient about our financial priorities, so I decided I could make it happen by working more. I started accepting every overtime opportunity one could get. Nights, weekends, covering shifts for coworkers on vacation. In my industry, downtime is expensive. When a packaging line goes down in a food plant, every hour costs thousands. For about 2 months, I was working between 65 and 70 hours a week, funneling every extra dollar into what I thought of as the car fund. Sarah seemed supportive, told me she appreciated how hard I was working to make something happen for her. Her best friend, Monica, started coming over more often to keep her company while I was gone. I thought it was sweet. Monica is divorced, works for a healthcare startup, and always seemed reasonable. They drink wine, watch shows, and hang out while I was troubleshooting barcode scanners and conveyor sensors. Then came the moment that changed everything. One Tuesday, a site visit wrapped up early. What was supposed to be a 3-hour emergency turned out to be a dirty sensor. 20 minutes, problem solved. I got home around 7:30 instead of my usual 10 p.m. As I walked in, I heard voices in the kitchen. Sarah and Monica were talking, nothing unusual, so I planned to grab a beer and announce myself. That's when I heard Monica mention timing, and Sarah reply that she needed to be careful about when she made her move. At first, I assumed it was about work, or maybe planning a surprise. Then Sarah said she'd been thinking about it more lately, especially since I was never home, and that this might be the perfect chance to see what else was out there. Monica agreed. She said Sarah had been discussing this for weeks and needed to stop overthinking it. That Sarah deserved to explore her options and find something that better met her needs. Monica even offered to help handle the logistics, mentioning she had connections that could make things easier. I stood there, frozen, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding. Then Sarah said she was worried about the financial side of things. Monica responded that she could always return to her current situation if things didn't work out, and that I'd probably take her back because I was too kind for my own good. That's when everything clicked. I've consumed enough narrated Reddit stories and cheating exposés on channels like Mark Narrations, Telltales, and Marquee to recognize exactly what kind of conversation I was overhearing. This wasn't about a work assignment or a surprise party. My wife was actively planning to step outside our marriage and treating our relationship like a safety net. I carefully set the beer down, backed out of the house, and got into my truck. I sat there for about 10 minutes just staring at the dashboard, trying to make sense of what I just learned. After that, I drove aimlessly for another hour before eventually returning home and acting like everything was normal. Sarah asked how my day went. I said it was fine. We went to bed like any other night. The following days felt surreal. Sarah began dropping comments about needing space to think, about feeling stuck in a routine. She asked hypothetical questions about whether people could love each other but still feel drawn to other connections. Subtle as a brick. Friday night, she finally brought it up directly. She said she'd been reflecting and felt like we'd married too young. We were 28 and 31 at the time, but sure. She said she loved me but wasn't sure she was still in love with me. All the classics from the I want to cheat but sound enlightened script. She suggested maybe staying at Monica's place for a few weeks to gain clarity, that some distance might help her understand what she really wanted. If we were meant to be, she said, we'd find our way back to each other. I asked her outright if there was someone else. She immediately denied it, said she'd never do that, claimed she just needed time alone to figure herself out. Monica had offered her couch, and maybe they'd take a short trip to help clear her head. So I told her I understood, that I'd keep working, keep saving, and give her the space she needed to sort through her feelings. What I didn't mention was that I'd already spoken to a divorce attorney the previous Thursday morning. Sarah moved out on Sunday. She packed clothes, her laptop, some books, hugged me at the door, and said she hoped we could work things out, that this wasn't the end, just a pause for perspective. Monday morning, I went to the bank and transferred all of our savings, including the $12,000 car fund, into a new account under my name only. Our prenup gave me every legal right to do so. Her name was never on my work accounts, and I left the joint checking account untouched except for redirecting my paycheck. Tuesday, my lawyer prepared the divorce paperwork. Nothing aggressive, just a straightforward filing citing irreconcilable differences. The prenup made everything simple. We each kept what we entered with. Any house sale would be split. No spousal support. Wednesday, Sarah texted asking if I'd been thinking about us and whether I was ready to seriously discuss repairing our relationship. I replied that I'd done a lot of thinking and was absolutely ready to talk. I asked if she could come by Thursday evening. She sounded hopeful, said she'd been reflecting too, and was eager to discuss our future. Thursday night, she arrived with takeout and started talking about how the time apart had helped her realize how much she missed our life. How maybe she'd been overanalyzing things. How stepping away can make you appreciate what you have. That's when I handed her the divorce papers. Her expression shifted faster than I've ever seen. Nervous anticipation turned to confusion, then anger in seconds. She asked what this was supposed to mean, whether it was a joke, why I was being dramatic about her needing a little breathing room. I told her I knew exactly what kind of space she wanted and decided to give her all of it permanently. She demanded an explanation. So I told her I'd overheard her conversation with Monica the Tuesday before. Not every word, but more than enough to understand she was planning to cheat and expected me to be waiting when she finished exploring. Her face said everything. She tried to claim I'd misunderstood, said I'd taken things out of context, that she'd never actually done anything. I told her that was great news because it meant the divorce would be simpler. No infidelity claims, just two people who wanted different things. Then she asked about the money, whether she could access the savings to get an apartment, maybe finally buy a reliable car. I told her the account no longer existed. The overtime money I'd earned over the past 2 months was now in an account she couldn't touch. I explained that I decided I wasn't interested in financing her self-discovery journey after all. That's when she exploded, accused me of being controlling, said cutting off access to money she'd been counting on was financial abuse. I reminded her that our prenup clearly stated my earnings were mine and that she'd never contributed to the car fund she'd planned to use for her independence adventure. She left around 9, taking her food with her. So read it. A small part of me wondered afterward whether I should have confronted her the moment I overheard that conversation. Maybe I should have given her a chance to explain herself or back out of whatever she was planning. Maybe I'd misunderstood, and she was just spiraling through some early 30s identity crisis that had nothing to do with infidelity. But the more I replayed it in my head, the more convinced I became that I'd understood perfectly. I wasn't trying to ruin her life or leave her stranded. She still had her job. She could stay with Monica. She's an adult who can figure out transportation and housing on her own. I just didn't see why I should bankroll a personal awakening that involved testing out other people's beds. Still, I asked myself if I was being too harsh. Maybe I should have tried harder to salvage things. I posted here asking for perspective, and Reddit delivered. A few days later, I came back with an update, and when I say my inbox exploded, I mean it absolutely detonated. The overwhelming response was that I wasn't in the wrong and that I needed to stop doubting my instincts. A lot of people pointed out something I hadn't fully processed yet. Sarah's reaction to the divorce papers told me everything. If she'd been innocent, she would have been devastated or heartbroken. Instead, her first concern was money and access to accounts. That realization hit hard. Someone with nothing to hide doesn't immediately start calculating finances. Several commenters suggested documenting everything or trying to gather proof, but I had zero interest in becoming a detective. I didn't want to snoop through phones or track movements. I'd heard enough, and her reaction confirmed it. I wasn't going to turn myself into someone I wouldn't recognize. Others warned me she'd likely try to come back once she realized I was serious. Turns out Reddit has a disturbing gift for prophecy. Friday morning, the day after she received the papers, Sarah showed up at my house at 6:30 a.m. I was getting ready for work when someone started pounding on the door like the building was on fire. She wanted to talk. Really talk. No games, no avoidance. She admitted she might have been thinking about other possibilities, but said seeing the divorce papers snapped her back to reality. She claimed she was just scared of commitment, that she didn't actually want anyone else, and that I was the best thing in her life. I told her I appreciated the honesty, but that ship had already left the harbor. If she wanted to work on our marriage, she could have done that before planning an affair with Monica's help. Not with Monica, but encouraged by her. That's when she shifted tactics. She blamed Monica, said Monica had been poisoning her mind, telling her she was settling and deserved more, claimed Monica was projecting bitterness from her own divorce and pushing Sarah to sabotage her marriage. She insisted she never would have actually followed through if I hadn't gone straight to divorce. I asked her a simple question. Was there a specific person she'd been planning to explore with, or was this more of a general curiosity? She went quiet for a long time, then admitted there was a guy from her yoga studio who'd been flirting with her for months. Nothing physical had happened, she said, but she'd been wondering. Monica had encouraged her, telling her life was short and regrets were forever. That was it. Not hypothetical. Not abstract. There was a target. I thanked her for finally telling the truth and told her it didn't change my decision. She started crying and asked if we could try counseling. Said throwing away 6 years together was insane. But something several of you said stuck with me. She wasn't remorseful about the plan. She was upset she got caught. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, she would have gone through with it and expected me to still be here when she was done. I told her I'd think about it, mostly so she'd leave and I could go to work, but my mind was already made up. That same weekend, another situation unfolded. Sarah tried to access our joint checking account and discovered I'd changed my direct deposit. She called Saturday morning upset, saying she needed money for basic living expenses and couldn't survive on yoga income alone. I reminded her that our prenup made each of us responsible for our own expenses during separation. She could increase her hours, find more design work, or figure something else out. Several Redditors had warned me she might try to claim financial dependence. They were right. Monday morning, Monica called me. It was the first time we'd spoken since everything blew up. She said Sarah was really struggling and asked if I thought I was being too harsh. That Sarah had made a mistake, but didn't deserve to have her entire life destroyed. I asked Monica whether she thought I deserved my life being blown up instead, whether I was supposed to quietly finance Sarah's affair and wait patiently while she decided if I was still good enough. Monica went silent. then admitted she didn't realize I'd overheard their conversation and said maybe she'd given bad advice. I told her Sarah was an adult who made her own choices, and if she was struggling now, she could work through it herself. I wasn't her backup plan or safety net anymore. Monica argued that Sarah never actually crossed the line. I pointed out that planning and execution aren't that far apart. The call ended shortly after. So read it, I stayed the course. No reconciliation talks. No counseling. No, let's try again. I moved forward with a divorce and let Sarah handle her own consequences. One thing a lot of people asked was whether I felt guilty about the timing. Serving her papers right when she thought she was coming back to fix things. Honestly? No. She didn't return because she suddenly realized she loved me. She came back because whatever she thought she wanted didn't work out, and I was the safe option. That isn't love. That's convenience. I figured my next update would be about legal timelines and paperwork. I was wrong. A few days later, things escalated exactly the way many of you predicted. Monday morning started like any other workday, as normal as anything could be under the circumstances. I was catching up on tasks I neglected while dealing with the personal chaos when I got a call from HR. Someone had contacted them claiming I was in the middle of a volatile divorce and might be emotionally unstable at work. For context, my job is industrial equipment sales. My clients care about whether their packaging lines run, not my personal life. Still, HR has protocols. I had to sit through an uncomfortable conversation about my mental state and whether I needed time off or access to counseling resources. I explained briefly that I was getting divorced. Everything was being handled through attorneys, and my work performance hadn't been affected. My manager backed me up immediately and even noted my numbers had improved lately. Overtime apparently pays off, but it didn't make the situation any less humiliating. It didn't take long to figure out where the call came from. Tuesday, Sarah texted asking if we could meet to discuss logistics. Against my better judgment, and probably against Reddit's advice, I agreed. I thought we might need to sort out practical matters anyway. That was a mistake. She showed up looking exhausted, like someone living on caffeine and stress. She opened with an apology about the HR situation, said she was desperate and didn't know how else to get my attention. I told her contact in my workplace was completely inappropriate and asked what logistics couldn't be handled through lawyers. That's when she dropped it on me. She said she was pregnant. I'll spare you the suspense. After a few minutes of panic and some very fast mental math, I realized the timeline didn't add up. We hadn't slept together since before she moved out, barely 3 weeks earlier. Too soon for a positive test. Too soon for symptoms. None of it made sense. She claimed she'd been feeling off for a while and didn't want to worry me while I was working so much. Said she'd taken a test that morning and it was positive. I asked if she wanted to go to a doctor together to confirm it. If this was real, it would change everything about the divorce. She said she wasn't ready for that yet and needed time to process, but felt I needed to know because it meant we owed it to the child to try again. I told her medical confirmation was necessary before any decisions were made. If she was pregnant, we'd work out co-parenting through lawyers. Her expression fell flat. I think she expected me to immediately abandon the divorce and rush back. Wednesday, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was the guy from her yoga studio, the one she'd admitted she'd been considering. He said he wanted to clear the air. He had no idea she was married when she flirted with him and backed off once he found out. Apparently, Sarah told him we were separated and divorcing, but someone else later corrected that. I thanked him. He hadn't done anything wrong. Sarah had misrepresented everything, but it confirmed something that had been bothering me. She'd been laying groundwork with him for a long time. This wasn't sudden confusion. It was a slow build. Thursday, Sarah texted asking if I'd thought more about the pregnancy and what it meant for us. I replied that we could discuss co-parenting once there was medical confirmation. She called immediately, upset that I was being cold. I told her I wasn't cold. I was realistic. I wasn't making life-altering decisions based on a home test and vague symptoms. She hung up. Friday was a turning point. I came home from work to find Sarah's car in my driveway and Sarah sitting on the porch steps. She said she'd been waiting over an hour and needed to tell me the truth. So I listened. The pregnancy was fake. She admitted she'd hoped it would make me reconsider, but realized I'd insist on proof and the lie wouldn't hold. The yoga studio situation was real and worse than she'd admitted. Months of texting, coffee meetups, plans to sleep together during the separation. Monica had encouraged all of it, but when Sarah finally tried to move things forward, the guy backed out after learning she was still married. That's when she realized her plan wasn't unfolding the way she imagined. She said the divorce papers were a wake-up call, that she was about to lose the best thing in her life over a fantasy fueled by bad advice and too many movies. She asked if there was any way I could forgive her. Reddit, I won't pretend that seeing her like that was easy. This wasn't the confident woman who'd calmly asked for space to find herself. This was someone who finally understood she'd dismantled her own life for nothing. Watching that realization hit was painful, even after everything. But a lot of you had warned me this moment would come, that once the fantasy collapsed and the consequences became real, she'd come back with tears, confessions, and desperation, and that I shouldn't let temporary guilt override the deeper issue. She hadn't made a single impulsive mistake. She'd made calculated choices over months. She was willing to betray me and expected I'd still be waiting when she was done exploring. I told her I appreciated the honesty, but nothing had changed. She wasn't confessing because she felt remorse. She was confessing because her plan failed and reality caught up. She asked what she was supposed to do now, where she was supposed to go, how she could rebuild her life. I told her those were questions she should have asked herself before she decided to dismantle ours. She left around 9 that night and hasn't contacted me since. Monica, however, called Saturday morning. Sarah had been staying with her and was apparently in a very bad mental state. Monica asked if I felt satisfied ruining Sarah's life, or if I could find some compassion. I told Monica that Sarah had ruined her own life. I was simply refusing to be collateral damage. If Monica truly cared about Sarah, she'd help her move forward instead of trying to guilt me into rescuing her. Monica said I was cold-hearted. I told her I was realistic. The call ended shortly after. The divorce process continued. No more fake pregnancies. No more calls to my workplace. And apparently, I was now the villain for refusing to accept the role of fallback husband. Your advice about staying firm and not engaging with manipulation tactics was spot on. It's been tempting to feel guilty, especially seeing Sarah genuinely distressed, but you were right. She wasn't grieving the pain she caused me. She was grieving the consequences she didn't expect. Then came another update. I thought things were finally settling down. That assumption was laughably wrong. Monday morning, my lawyer called. Sarah had filed a motion accusing me of hiding assets and requesting temporary spousal support during the divorce. According to her filing, I drained joint accounts and left her unable to support herself. My lawyer wasn't concerned. The prenup addressed this exact situation, and I had records showing funds came directly from overtime pay. Still, it meant more delays and more legal fees, which was likely the real goal. Tuesday brought a different surprise. My mortgage company called asking about my plans for the house. Someone had contacted them claiming to represent both parties and asking about removing a spouse from the mortgage. That person was not my attorney. Sarah had contacted them herself, identifying as my wife and asking about refinancing options. She even provided our case number, which she shouldn't have had. The bank refused to give her details but wanted to confirm with me. I explained she had no authority to make inquiries on my behalf. Wednesday took things in an even stranger direction. When I got home, my neighbor was waiting in her yard. She's a retired teacher in her 70s, sharp as a tack. She said a young woman had come by earlier asking questions about me. Had there been loud arguments? Did women come and go from my house? Did I seem controlling or aggressive? The woman claimed to be a social worker conducting a routine check related to a domestic situation. My neighbor sensed something was off and asked for identification. The woman became evasive and left. Based on the description, it sounded exactly like Monica. I thanked my neighbor and immediately called my lawyer. My lawyer said what had happened technically qualified as harassment. We could file a complaint, but he suggested it might be smarter to document everything instead. If Sarah tried to argue I was being unreasonable or abusive, this behavior would speak for itself. At that point, I decided to stop being reactive and start being proactive. Thursday, I called Monica directly. She tried to play dumb at first, claimed she had no idea what I was referring to. When I mentioned the neighbor, the fake social worker story, and how closely the description matched her, she became defensive, said she was just trying to help her friend. I told her impersonating a social worker could be illegal. I also told her that contacting my job, my mortgage company, and my neighbors cross a serious line. If she genuinely wanted to help Sarah, she should be encouraging her to focus on moving forward instead of sabotaging the divorce. Monica dismissed my concerns and said I was being paranoid. Claimed Sarah was simply trying to understand her legal options. I pointed out that Sarah already had a lawyer, and snooping around neighbors asking about domestic abuse wasn't legal strategy. It was panic. Monica hung up on me. Friday delivered the weekend's main event. I was legitimately working late this time. A packaging line at a food processing plant went down, and I didn't get home until around 10 at night. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my front door wasn't fully closed. Reddit. I've seen enough true crime to know you don't walk into a house like that. I stayed in my truck and called the police. Officers arrived and cleared the house. There were no signs of forced entry and nothing obvious missing. But on the kitchen counter, I found something telling. Sarah's keys. She let herself in, looked around, and left them behind. No message, no explanation. The officers asked if I wanted to file a report. My lawyer said what had happened technically qualified as harassment. We could file a complaint, but he suggested it might be smarter to document everything instead. If Sarah tried to argue I was being unreasonable or abusive, this behavior would speak for itself. At that point, I decided to stop being reactive and start being proactive. Thursday, I called Monica directly. She tried to play dumb at first, claimed she had no idea what I was referring to. When I mentioned the neighbor, the fake social worker story, and how closely the description matched her, she became defensive, said she was just trying to help her friend. I told her impersonating a social worker could be illegal. I also told her that contacting my job, my mortgage company, and my neighbors cross a serious line. If she genuinely wanted to help Sarah, she should be encouraging her to focus on moving forward instead of sabotaging the divorce. Monica dismissed my concerns and said I was being paranoid. Claimed Sarah was simply trying to understand her legal options. I pointed out that Sarah already had a lawyer, and snooping around neighbors asking about domestic abuse wasn't legal strategy. It was panic. Monica hung up on me. Friday delivered the weekend's main event. I was legitimately working late this time. A packaging line at a food processing plant went down, and I didn't get home until around 10 at night. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my front door wasn't fully closed. Reddit. I've seen enough true crime to know you don't walk into a house like that. I stayed in my truck and called the police. Officers arrived and cleared the house. There were no signs of forced entry and nothing obvious missing. But on the kitchen counter, I found something telling. Sarah's keys. She let herself in, looked around, and left them behind. No message, no explanation. The officers asked if I wanted to file a report. I said no, but asked them to document that she'd entered the house without permission and returned her keys. One officer asked if this was related to a domestic dispute. I gave a brief overview. She nodded and said they see this behavior more often than people realize. Divorce can make people act in ways that surprise everyone, including themselves. She suggested changing my locks and installing security cameras in case things escalated further. Saturday morning, I replaced every lock on the house. That afternoon, I installed a basic doorbell camera system. Nothing fancy, just enough to record who came and went. Monday brought another call from my lawyer. The good news, Sarah's request for temporary spousal support was denied. The prenup held exactly as intended, and the judge wasn't impressed by claims that I was hiding assets. The bad news, Sarah's attorney requested an extension, citing the need to review financial documentation. More delays, more legal fees, likely an attempt to wear me down. My lawyer told me this was common in contested divorces. Buying time, hoping the other party would get tired and settle. He asked whether I wanted to pursue mediation or push forward to final judgment. Reddit, this is where your advice really mattered. A few months ago, I might have agreed to mediation just to make it stop, but you all made something very clear. Giving in to manipulation doesn't end manipulation, it rewards it. I told my lawyer to proceed to the end. So that's where things stand. Sarah's moved from fake pregnancies and workplace interference to amateur investigations and unauthorized house visits. Monica is playing dress up as a social worker. And I've learned that divorce can unlock levels of creativity in people you never thought possible. Thank you, Reddit, for keeping me grounded. Your reminders to expect escalation and not personalize have been invaluable. Without that perspective, I might have talked myself into guilt over Sarah's collapse or Monica's harassment campaign.